If God created the universe, then who, or what, created God? From the dawn of time, humans have stared at the stars, desperate to understand where it all began. We've built gods out of fire, worshipped the sun, sculpted divine images, and written holy texts claiming to have the ultimate answer. But here's the kicker: in almost every tradition, God is simply assumed. God just is. Eternal. Untouchable. Without beginning or end. And for thousands of years, we've been told, don't question it. Don't even think about it. But not today. Let's get uncomfortable. Let's tear down the walls of certainty and take a good, hard look at the cracks in this foundation. Because the moment we ask who created God, something remarkable happens. The question unravels the very logic that supports the idea of a creator. If everything in existence must have a cause, as so many religions claim, then why should God be the exception? Is it because we're afraid of the alternative? Afraid of the idea that maybe, just maybe, there's no final answer waiting for us at the end of this rabbit hole? Let's break it down. Imagine the universe as a grand domino effect. Cause leads to effect, one thing leads to another, and eventually, it all traces back to a beginning. Theists argue that the first domino, the uncaused cause, must be God. Sounds neat, doesn't it? But here's the problem: why stop at God? Why not ask what came before him? Saying God is eternal feels like cheating the system. It's like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat and expecting us not to ask, wait, where did the rabbit come from? But this isn't just about poking holes in ancient beliefs. This is about grappling with the enormity of existence itself. Let's go deeper. Science tells us the universe had a beginning, what we call the Big Bang. But before that moment, nothing. No time, no space, no matter. Literally nothing. And yet, something emerged. A spark. A singularity that gave birth to everything. But does that mean the universe needs a creator? Or is it possible that the universe itself, like God, is eternal in some way we can't yet comprehend? Here's where it gets wild. Some physicists argue that our universe could have sprung into existence without any divine intervention at all. In fact, quantum mechanics suggests that particles can appear and disappear spontaneously, without a cause. If particles can do it, why not an entire universe? And if a universe can come into existence without a creator, what does that mean for the idea of God? Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't about saying, hey, you're wrong, and science is right. This isn't about mocking faith or dismissing the comfort it brings. This is about curiosity. About refusing to settle for easy answers. Because if we stop asking questions, if we stop pushing the boundaries of what we know, we might as well stop thinking altogether. So here's where we're heading. Over the next few minutes, we're going to dissect the origins of God. Not to tear anyone's beliefs apart, but to uncover the hidden assumptions, the ancient traditions, and the groundbreaking ideas that have shaped this question. We'll pull from history, philosophy, science, and even some of the most heated debates of our time. Let's take a step back into the ancient world, where humans first attempted to put the unexplainable into words. It's here, in the oldest scriptures of humanity, that the idea of God begins to take shape, not as a discovery, but as a declaration. The divine wasn't found. It was defined. And those definitions, carved into stone tablets and whispered across generations, continue to echo through history. In the Bible, it starts with one bold proclamation: in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. No prelude, no backstory, no origin. God is presented as the ultimate authority, the architect of all that is, was, and ever will be. But it's what the Bible doesn't say that's just as fascinating. It doesn't ask where God came from, or why he exists. Instead, it insists that God is eternal, a being from everlasting to everlasting. It's like walking into a movie halfway through and being told not to ask about the first half. In the Quran, the narrative takes a similar approach. God is described as Ahad, absolute, indivisible, uncreated. The Quran doesn't entertain the possibility of a creator for God because, in its framework, God is the very essence of existence. He is not bound by time, space, or causality. To question his origin is to misunderstand his nature. It's an answer that feels complete, but only if you accept the premise. Now, contrast this with the ancient Vedic texts of Hinduism. Here, God isn't a single, defined entity. Instead, there's Brahman, the infinite, formless, eternal reality underlying all existence. Brahman isn't a creator in the traditional sense, it's the very fabric of being itself. Time, space, and causality are illusions within Brahman's infinite scope. It's an elegant solution, but one that raises even more questions about the nature of reality. Meanwhile, the Greeks offered a completely different perspective. They didn't start with a single creator god. Instead, they told stories of chaotic forces, Gaia, Uranus, Kronos, that gave rise to the cosmos. Plato and Aristotle, however, tried to bring order to these myths with philosophy. Plato spoke of a demiurge, a craftsman who shaped the universe from pre-existing chaos. Aristotle went a step further with his prime mover, an unchanging, eternal force that set the universe into motion. Neither idea fully explains the origin of the divine force itself, but they push the narrative beyond pure mythology. Each of these traditions shares one thing in common: they all sidestep the infinite regress problem. None of them delve into what came before the divine, and for good reason. Trying to explain God's origins opens up a Pandora's box of logic that ancient cultures weren't equipped or willing to handle. Instead, they chose to frame God as the beginning of all things, the ultimate anchor in an otherwise chaotic and uncertain universe. These scriptures weren't written in a vacuum. They were created in societies grappling with survival, power, and meaning. The gods they described weren't just abstract concepts, they were tools. They justified kingdoms, enforced laws, and provided comfort in the face of the unknown. When the Bible claims God is eternal, or when the Quran asserts that God is beyond causality, it's not just theology, it's a statement of authority. It's saying, this is the answer. Do not question it. The real story here isn't just about God's supposed eternity. It's about humanity's need to stop the chain of questions somewhere. Ancient scriptures gave us that stopping point, a divine figure beyond scrutiny. But as we dig into these texts today, we see the scaffolding, the deliberate choices made by their authors. The question of who created God wasn't avoided because it wasn't important, it was avoided because it was too dangerous, too destabilizing, too infinite. Aristotle started the conversation with what he called the prime mover. He looked at the universe and saw motion everywhere, planets orbiting, rivers flowing, people living, and reasoned that all motion must have a starting point. Something had to move first to set everything else in motion. That first, unmoved mover, he claimed, was God. But notice something: Aristotle wasn't talking about a personal God with feelings or a plan for humanity. His prime mover wasn't a deity to worship, it was a logical necessity, a placeholder to explain how motion began. Fast forward to Thomas Aquinas in the Middle Ages. Aquinas took Aristotle's idea and molded it into something religious. In his famous 5 Ways, Aquinas argued that everything in the universe has a cause, and if you follow that chain of causes back far enough, you reach something uncaused, God. But here's the catch. Aquinas didn't explain why God gets to break the rules. Why can God exist without a cause when nothing else can? His argument essentially says, we need something uncaused to stop infinite regress, and that something is God. It's a brilliant leap of logic, but also a leap of faith. Then came David Hume, the rebel of the Enlightenment. Hume didn't just question religion, he questioned the very foundations of logic itself. He argued that causality, this idea that everything must have a cause, isn't a law of the universe. It's a habit of the human mind. We see one thing happen after another and assume they're connected, but what if they're not? What if the universe doesn't need a cause at all? Hume wasn't saying God didn't exist, he was saying the arguments for God's existence were based on assumptions, not facts. And then there's Nietzsche. While others wrestled with God's origins, Nietzsche declared outright, God is dead. To him, God wasn't an eternal being but an idea, a construct humans created to make sense of a chaotic world. When science and philosophy began pulling back the curtain, Nietzsche believed, the idea of God started to crumble. His statement wasn't a celebration, it was a warning. Without God, humanity would face an existential crisis, a void of meaning that needed filling. But let's take a step back and look at the big picture. These philosophers weren't just arguing about God's existence, they were challenging the very framework of how we think. Aristotle forced us to confront the origins of motion. Aquinas dared us to imagine a being beyond causality. Hume shattered our trust in causality itself. And Nietzsche held up a mirror and asked us to consider what happens when we strip away the divine altogether. Here's the mind-bending part. Even when these thinkers tried to reason their way to or away from God, they were still wrestling with the same core problem, infinity. Infinite motion, infinite causality, infinite regress. Our brains aren't built to handle it. Infinity feels unnatural, yet the moment we try to eliminate it, by invoking God or the universe itself, we end up right back at infinity's doorstep. Philosophy shows us something profound. The question of God's origins isn't just a theological problem. It's a human problem, a reflection of our desperate need to impose order on a universe that might be fundamentally chaotic. Whether you see God as a being, a principle, or an illusion, the struggle to understand his, or its, origins reveals just how deep our need for answers really goes. And yet, even as these great minds debated, something new was stirring. A shift. A challenge that would rewrite everything we thought we knew about creation and existence. That shift? Science. And it was about to explode onto the scene, tearing down ancient assumptions and replacing them with something even more terrifying, a universe that might not need God at all. It started with the Big Bang Theory, not just a catchy name, but a radical idea that the universe had a beginning, a singularity. This wasn't theology, it was math and physics pointing to a time when space, time, and matter didn't exist. Georges Lemaitre, a Catholic priest and physicist, first proposed the idea in the 1920s, and even he didn't fully grasp its implications. If the universe had a beginning, what triggered it? Religious thinkers saw this as proof of God's creation. But scientists didn't stop there. They started asking a different question: did the universe even need a trigger at all? Quantum mechanics flipped everything on its head. At the subatomic level, particles behave in ways that defy common sense. They can appear and disappear spontaneously, without any apparent cause. Physicist Lawrence Krauss took this idea and ran with it in his book A Universe from Nothing. He argued that the laws of quantum mechanics make it possible for entire universes to pop into existence from nothing, no divine intervention required. This wasn't speculation. It was grounded in observations of how our universe works at its smallest scales. And then there's Stephen Hawking. In his later years, Hawking proposed that the universe doesn't need God because the laws of physics, like gravity, are sufficient to explain its creation. Gravity, he argued, allows the universe to create itself spontaneously. To Hawking, asking who created God was irrelevant. The real question was whether the universe needed anything outside of itself to exist. His answer? No. Cosmology introduced another wild idea, the multiverse. What if our universe isn't unique? What if it's one of countless others, each with its own laws of physics? In a multiverse scenario, the idea of a singular creator becomes almost meaningless. Instead of one universe needing one explanation, you have an infinite landscape of possibilities. This doesn't eliminate God outright, but it makes him unnecessary. The multiverse shifts the focus from who created this to what are the odds that this particular universe emerged? And in an infinite multiverse, the odds are always 100%. Even the fine-tuning argument, often used to support God, started to lose its shine. Yes, our universe seems perfectly calibrated for life, its constants and forces balanced just right. But if there are infinite universes, most of them won't support life, and we just happen to be in one that does. No creator needed. Just statistical inevitability. These scientific revelations didn't just challenge the idea of God as a creator, they obliterated the boundaries of human understanding. Suddenly, we weren't dealing with a simple question of who made this. Instead, we were staring into a void of infinite possibilities, a cosmos governed by laws that seemed to operate without purpose or intent. And yet, these breakthroughs brought their own mysteries. Where did the laws of physics come from? Why does anything exist at all? Science, for all its triumphs, still can't answer these questions. But what it has done is strip away the need for a God who intervenes directly in the creation of the universe. It has shown that the universe can operate, expand, and evolve entirely on its own. The concept of God, as presented in most religions, relies on this idea of eternity. God is uncreated, uncaused, and exists outside time. But what does that really mean? To exist outside time is to exist in a state that our minds can't even picture. There's no before, no after. Just an eternal now. It's a state that defies the very structure of our reality. And yet, it's the foundation upon which the idea of God rests. But here's where the paradox gets even more intriguing. If God can be eternal, why not the universe itself? Why can't matter, energy, or the laws of physics be eternal? For centuries, theologians and philosophers have argued that the universe couldn't possibly be infinite, it must have had a beginning, a moment of creation. But when pressed on God's origins, the answer is always the same: God doesn't need a cause because he's eternal. It's a double standard baked into the argument. Science, meanwhile, has no problem dealing with the infinite. Mathematics, physics, and cosmology all embrace it. Infinity shows up in equations, in the vastness of space, and in the never-ending progression of time. The multiverse theory even suggests that infinity is the default state of existence. And if that's the case, why invoke God at all? If something eternal must exist, why assume it's a deity instead of an eternal universe? This isn't just a modern debate. Ancient Indian philosophies, like those found in the Upanishads, describe a reality where time itself is an illusion. The cycles of creation and destruction, the great cosmic dance of Shiva, repeat endlessly, with no beginning and no end. In this framework, eternity isn't tied to a god, but to the nature of existence itself. The universe isn't a creation, it's a cycle. A loop. Something that has always been and always will be. And then there's the philosophical challenge of the infinite regress. If everything must have a cause, as Aquinas and others insisted, then what caused God? The answer is always the same: God is the stopping point. The uncaused cause. But this answer raises more questions than it solves. Why does the chain of causality get to stop at God? Why not stop it sooner? Or later? Philosophers like Bertrand Russell pushed back on this idea, arguing that the universe might simply be a brute fact, something that exists without explanation, just as God is claimed to do. But let's dig even deeper. Eternity doesn't just challenge our understanding of God or the universe, it challenges our understanding of reality itself. Our entire existence is framed by time. Seconds ticking by. Days turning into nights. Causes leading to effects. Take that away, and what's left? The concept of something eternal, whether it's God or the universe, forces us to imagine a reality without time. And that's something our minds aren't wired to handle. This is where the human struggle with infinity becomes almost poetic. We've created gods, written scriptures, and built entire systems of thought to make sense of the eternal. But no matter how hard we try, infinity slips through our fingers. It's too vast, too incomprehensible. And yet, it's at the heart of everything we're trying to understand. The paradox of eternity isn't just about God or the universe. It's about the limits of human understanding. Every time we think we've found an answer, infinity stretches out before us, laughing at our attempts to contain it. And the deeper we go, the more we realize that this question, this endless, unanswerable question, isn't a flaw in our thinking. It's the essence of it. One of the most famous battles of ideas erupted in the modern era, William Lane Craig, a devout Christian philosopher, versus Christopher Hitchens, a relentless critic of religion. Craig argued that the universe demanded a cause, and that cause must be God. He leaned on the Callum cosmological argument, insisting that everything that begins to exist must have a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore God exists. It was clean, logical, and delivered with precision. But Hitchens fired back with his signature wit and razor-sharp critique. To him, inserting God as the answer wasn't solving the problem, it was just pushing it back a step. If God is the cause of the universe, what caused God? Hitchens didn't just question the logic, he questioned the motive. To him, the God hypothesis was a convenient placeholder for ignorance, a way to avoid confronting the harsh reality that we might never know the ultimate answer. Then there's the clash between Richard Dawkins and Alistair McGrath. Dawkins, in his book The God Delusion, called God a mental virus, a construct born out of humanity's fear of the unknown. He argued that evolution explains life's complexity far better than any divine designer ever could. McGrath, a theologian and former atheist, countered that science and faith weren't enemies, they were complementary ways of exploring reality. To McGrath, Dawkins' atheism was as dogmatic as the religious fundamentalism he criticized. But what made this debate so electrifying wasn't just the arguments, it was the raw passion on both sides, the collision of two worldviews fighting to define truth. And then there's the wildcard, Jordan Peterson. Peterson doesn't fit neatly into either camp. He doesn't argue for a literal God, but for the psychological and societal necessity of belief. To Peterson, God is a metaphor for the highest values, the embodiment of meaning in a chaotic world. His ideas infuriate both theists and atheists, precisely because they refuse to play by the rules of traditional debates. Peterson isn't trying to prove or disprove God's existence. He's redefining what the concept of God even means. These debates aren't just intellectual exercises. They reveal the fault lines in our thinking, the places where logic, emotion, and belief collide. They show how deeply the question of God's origins cuts into the human experience. And they highlight a fundamental truth: no one has all the answers. The theist, the atheist, the agnostic, they're all grappling with the same mystery, each from their own angle. But the fireworks don't end there. Enter Stephen Fry, the brilliant actor and writer who delivered one of the most visceral critiques of God in recent memory. In a now legendary interview, Fry described God, if he exists, as a moral monster. He didn't argue from science or logic, he argued from outrage. If God created everything, Fry demanded to know, why did he create suffering? Why diseases? Why injustice? His words hit like a sledgehammer, not because they answered anything, but because they exposed the emotional weight behind the question of God's role in existence. So here we are, standing at the edge of everything we've explored. Philosophy, science, ancient scriptures, and the greatest debates of our time have all led us here, to the most profound, unsettling, and perhaps unanswerable question of all: why is there something, rather than nothing? The existence of something, matter, energy, life, consciousness, isn't just a fact. It's a cosmic anomaly. Logic tells us that nothingness should be the default state. Nothing is simple. Nothing is stable. Nothing doesn't require an explanation. And yet, here we are. Stars burn, galaxies spin, particles collide, and you and I exist to talk about it. It's a reality so improbable that it feels like it demands an explanation. But every explanation we attempt only deepens the mystery. Religions address this question by asserting that God willed existence into being. But this answer, elegant as it may seem, raises an even more perplexing issue. Why does God exist? Why should anything, even a divine being, exist instead of absolute nothingness? Calling God the ultimate answer doesn't resolve the paradox. It amplifies it. Science, for all its power, doesn't provide closure either. The Big Bang gives us a starting point, but it doesn't explain the existence of the laws of physics that allowed it to happen. Quantum mechanics offers glimpses into a universe where particles can emerge from a vacuum, but it doesn't tell us why the vacuum itself exists or why the rules of quantum mechanics exist at all. Even multiverse theory, with its infinite possibilities, leaves us grappling with the same fundamental question: why is there anything? Philosophy, of course, dives headfirst into the chaos. Some thinkers, like Bertrand Russell, argue that existence is a brute fact, something that simply is, without reason or cause. Others, like Leibniz, insist there must be a sufficient reason for why the universe exists. But every attempt to answer the question seems to create more layers of complexity. Even the idea that nothing might be unstable, as some physicists suggest, doesn't solve the puzzle. After all, why should instability exist in the first place? This isn't just a question of science or philosophy. It's a question that cuts to the core of what it means to exist at all. If there's no reason for existence, does that make it meaningless? Or does it make it the greatest mystery of all, something so profound that our minds can't fully grasp it? The human urge to answer this question isn't just about curiosity. It's about understanding our place in the grand tapestry of reality. And yet, maybe the beauty of this question lies in its resistance to being answered. Maybe the fact that we can even ask it is the most extraordinary thing of all. The existence of something, or of us, of this universe, of the very idea of questions, isn't just a riddle. It's a testament to the depth and wonder of reality itself. So where does that leave us? Not with answers, but with awe. With a sense of just how vast, intricate, and unfathomable existence truly is. The fact that we're here, together, contemplating this question, is itself a miracle of sorts. Whether you find your answers in God, in science, in philosophy, or in the mystery itself, one thing is certain: this question will keep humanity searching for as long as we exist. Thank you for sticking with me through this incredible journey. You've made it to the end of one of the most mind-bending explorations we could embark on together. Your time, your curiosity, your willingness to think beyond the surface, that's what makes conversations like this so powerful. So, thank you for being here, for questioning, for wondering. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries of existence. Thank you for watching.